Mr. Productivity, thank you so much for coming on the Inner Edison Podcast. Glad to have you here today.
Ed, thank you.
We should have been recording the first 10 minutes of us talking. That would have been good information for everybody to know. It's amazing. You start these, you get in, you start talking, you're like, oh, we should have this on the podcast because this would be good stuff. A lot of people understand that, they want to get into editing and podcasting and all the stuff that's involved with it. A lot of people think it's really easy to do, and it's not necessarily easy to do. Luckily, you have a wife who does your editing, so you just have to talk. So
yes.
Other people pay other people to do that stuff, and that's a couple $100 a episode. Gets expensive, and that's why I came up with this rule, the 10-23 rule of podcasting. 70% of all podcasts fail by the 10th episode. The other 20 that fail is up to the 23rd episode, and if you get past that, you're pretty much on the other side.
Well, I'm over 1,300, so I think I'm in the clear.
You made it, yeah. So how did you get it? I don't know how deep you want to get into, but how did you get into the podcasting? Because you've been doing it longer than me. I've been on a radio show since 2018, turned that into a podcast to get into a different market back in 2018, but didn't start really doing other podcasts until 3.5, 4 years ago.
Well, for me, I had to give full credit to Gary Vaynerchuk. So in the spring of 2017, I happened to catch one of his videos, and he said, the future is voice and audio, and everyone needs to have a podcast. And after I heard that, I'm like, could I have a podcast? I mean, I listen to podcasts, and I went to Google and typed those fateful words, how do I start a podcast? July 7th, 2017, I launched my podcast. Originally was called the Mark Struczewski Podcast. Yeah.
That was your name. So
yeah. But then I had a very smart coach that said, hey, your podcast is all about productivity. They call you Mr. Productivity on social media. So why don't you call it the Mr. Productivity Podcast? And so I did that. I paid LegalZoom $1 billion to trademark the name. I have MrProductivity.com. The only issue is on my show,
really nice,
when I say Mr. Productivity, what's that?
It's $500.
Yeah, well, I think I paid $7.99, but it wasn't $1 billion.
Yeah.
But the only thing I have to tell my people on my show is when I tell them to go to MrProductivity.com, I said, spell Mr. all the way out, MISTER, because if you go to MrProductivity.com, it's one of those things where Google or GoDaddy says, hey, this name is owned by someone else, and for a fee, we'll go find it for you. The website's dead, but I don't know what that fee is going to be. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going down that road. It's not that important.
Yeah. Well, they'll reach out to them, because I did it for one of my domains that I have for a financial company, and ended up being $2,500 for down the road. But that was just, they eventually put it up for sale. You know what I mean? So
okay.
You can go to who is,
yeah, and
find out who they are, and a lot of times they have a phone number in there.
Oh, okay.
And just
unless they have privacy on. I have privacy on, so my contact information all goes to GoDaddy, because I don't want to get all those emails.
Right, but if they don't have it anywhere and not hosted anywhere, it might have reverted back. You never know. Not everybody does that. Yeah.
Good point.
There's many, because I've researched this stuff when there's certain ones I wanted, because it's getting harder and harder to find them. Like I created a new podcast. It was called, it's come off of a sales thing, which was something I learned in college, 4 Aces and a Joker, which was an acronym for attitude, commitment, enthusiasm, and smile that you bring to the table in sales. That Joker is that unique ability you have, either you learn or natural. For me, I sold by the phone, so it was my voice. I had no idea I had a deep voice, so I put headphones on. And so I was like, no wonder I got 90% of my packages back when I talked to the women and other stuff that I did. But yeah, it just, I forget where I was going with that comment. But anyway, move on. All right. So starting your podcast, and how many, I mean, you must be doing pretty well now.
Well, if I'm doing well by monetization, I don't monetize my podcast. I purposely use it as a lead magnet. That was a decision from day one.
Well, and that's again, you have to figure out why you want to do this. Do you want to be the influencer, or are you trying to build your business? Use this to build your business. That's what I do for my radio show. It's called Real Estate Jerky. We give you something to chew on. It's about real estate and finance. I'm a mortgage broker, so it's all built. That's why I do the radio show. I get 50% of my business from it. And even though we do it for community and everything else, but people know who we are from it. And that's why you have to figure out why you're doing it.
I love the name of that show.
You like that?
Real Estate Jerky. You get something to chew on. That's an awesome title.
I came up with 2010 for a blog, of course, because everybody was doing blogs back then, and not like the ones we do now, but just totally, that's all it was. And it died. And then when they said, what are you going to name your radio show? I said, what about this? And they were like, oh my God, Smokehouse Studio. And they came up. So the opener of my radio show is amazing because they did an amazing job. And the guy we had to come in and actually do the voiceover, older guy, and his voice was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. But again, it's about what, if you're going to do something, do it really well. Period. Don't half-ass it. So,
a lot of people do that. A lot of people I know who've come to me and says, hey, I want to start a podcast. I want to be just like you. And I'm like, well, why are you doing it? And they're like, huh? Why are you doing it? And they have this confused look on their face. And I'm like, well, do you think you're the next Joe Rogan? Because you're not. Okay. So why do you want to do it? I always tell people, don't do it for the money. Do it because you want to. Do it because it's something you look forward to. When I had an interview earlier today, I didn't go, oh, I have to do another interview. I got excited about it. I'm meeting the coolest people. But I tell people, just don't go into podcasting because it's hot, or any endeavor, any social media platform, doesn't matter. You got to figure out, why are you doing this? And a lot of people just think, well, if I start a podcast, I'm going to be as rich as Joe Rogan. No, you're not. It's not going to happen. He's an outlier. You have to create a reason, or come up with a reason that you want to start the podcast. Because if you think you're just going to get tons of money and tons of monetization through ads, and it's probably not going to happen. So be realistic, find your why.
Correct. I mean, to be a Joe Rogan, you had to be on Fear Factor, and then you had to be on the wrestling stuff, and then you take all your fans from all that and bring them over to your podcast, and that's how easy it is.
If only. Yeah. And I'm not going to eat bugs to get a popular podcast. So if my podcast has to sit with fewer downloads than I would like, because I won't eat bugs, I'm not going to eat bugs to get a popular podcast. I draw the line at that, Ed. I'm not going to do that.
But no, people think it's so overnight. It's not overnight. That was like, 25 years of doing other things that built who he was. And then finally got to a point where he just doesn't care what he says once he got into wrestling and everything else he was doing. And that's the same thing with what we do. You don't become successful until you don't care. What I mean by you don't care is I'm going to make a mistake. It's okay. People like that. Everybody goes, you're going to edit out the oohs and the uhs. I'm like, no, you need to learn not to do them. And second, I don't want to see my video go like that. And because, I just cut out someone's word because they don't know what they're doing.
It reminds me when I was a professional speaker a few years ago, I used to wear suits. Hated wearing suits. And then one day I said, I'm not going to wear suits anymore. No one said anything. I'm like, wait a minute. I was told in the professional speakers associations, you got to wear a suit. I said, I'm not wearing suits. I show up in sneakers, jeans, and a clean t-shirt. No one said anything. No. In the very beginning, I'm like, it's okay if I don't wear a suit. And they're like, we don't care. And so I don't even ask anymore. Do you want my knowledge, or you want my wardrobe? What's more important? Not one person's ever said, we're not going to hire you because you don't wear a suit. And so I was in my business of a speaker because this is what I was told back in the day by old school people. This is the way it's done. But now you see speakers all the time up on stage in the t-shirt and jeans. No one cares.
Right. I mean, everything, especially since the pandemic, but prior to that, with all the different Facebook and everything else. But back in the day, because you're probably close to my age, they were like, okay, get the book Dress for Success, and you read that book, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's okay, this is how you get, this is what the type of suit, it's like, I wore suits forever in my industry. When I'm in here, I'm in Modesto, California. In Southern California, we were Tommy Bahamas and shorts because that's just what you wore. But then when I moved up here, everybody wore a suit. And then when the 2006 happened, that was all thrown out and everybody went to jeans and nice slacks or whatever else and a polo. But I got into wearing black t-shirts, and I wear a hat all the time. I'm bald too, but that's not why I wear a hat. I don't want to have skin cancer. But I wear black t-shirts for every one of my episodes. So you don't know when I recorded them. Especially with video.
How old are you?
I'm 50. I'm over 56. I couldn't tell you what exact date. I'd have to get my calculator out to tell you. I stopped counting after a while.
I'm 59, and people look at me and they're like, "You're 59?" I'm like, well, first of all, I shave the gray off every morning. The second reason why is I take care of myself. So I feel like I'm in my low 40s. I want to live to 110. So I take care of myself, and I identify as Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. For those of you old enough to remember who Winnie the Pooh was, I love Tigger. I am this annoyingly optimistically happy every day because I love life. I woke up today. I'm so grateful to be here on your show today.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. But yeah, that's my thing too, is my wife won't let me shave my gray. So I met her with my goatee 20 years ago. And even I adopted her 3 kids. They've never seen me without my goatee, except for when I had my deviated septum repair. I had to shave. And my wife's like, "You're growing it back." Cause I look like a baby face. And I don't care how old I still look young, super young. So.
Wow. Good for you. No, I every morning I'm shaving. Plus I like looking really young, ridiculously young.
There you go. I'm waiting for you to now do the Mr. Productivity with the ticker above it. Just change just a little bit so you don't get in trouble with the whole.
Yeah, that was just gonna say. I don't want to get sued by whoever owns that franchise now.
Disney, probably.
Yeah, probably. They own
Disney. Yeah.
They own everything. Disney owns everything.
Yeah. But so you were talking about how you just started doing video. How long have you been doing video?
About 6 months ago. So I fought this for so long because I'm an OG podcaster, audio only. And then I kept hearing, people want video. I'm like, who's going to watch a couple talking heads? Finally heard the, got the reasoning through my head, and I switched from Libsyn over to Spotify for podcasters because that's the only way you can have a video podcast on Spotify if they host it. Plus it's free. Joe Rogan hosts on Spotify. I mean, that's what it is. And I put the video also on YouTube, and I'm getting people watching it. The only thing I don't like about it is if I share a link to one of my episodes and you're not a Spotify person, opens up, it doesn't open up the video. It only plays the video in the app. So I was going to stop. I was going to kind of kick YouTube to the curb, but I can't, because I want people to have the whole experience. You got to have the app in order to watch the video. So I put it on YouTube. The video goes on Spotify and YouTube, and the first 15 minutes goes on LinkedIn. That's my platform of choice. Unfortunately, they won't give me more than 15 minutes, so I have to link the video to YouTube, but then audio goes everywhere else.
Why don't you just make it go live on LinkedIn?
That's what LinkedIn support says. And I'm like, I don't want to do that because I pre-record my episodes.
People don't.
And then my wife does a light dusting of the editing.
I understand that, but to get around it, because I do a lot of video and I do a lot of lives. I'm talking. Someone asked me the other day how many I did. I do at least 9 a week, and you can pre-record them and then make them go live.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So people will watch it, and it shows live, but they don't care if it was, people understand 90% of the stuff that says they're going live have already been recorded and is being re-pushed out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, nothing. I mean, even my radio show that we used to be live, I can't do live ever since the pandemic because they don't open up the studio on the weekends. Even though I have a full-fledged studio at my house now instead of my office, I still can't, do the live. So we have to record that on Wednesday, and then it plays on Saturday. And I'd love to have the live calls again, because I used to fill in for other people on their live shows and get so many calls and other stuff. And I like that, but I also don't want to give up my 5 p.m. every night. So
interesting.
Yeah. But I didn't know about, I only put my stuff to YouTube under my thing, Ed Parcaut. for a while there, I had this one, Inner Edison. I moved off to it separate because at that time, this was like a year or so ago, they were like, separate all your stuff. Your real estate, this is something totally different. It shouldn't be underneath you. It's messing up the algorithm. But then they came out now, they said, oh, it's a podcast. So it's like, I'm like, I got to move all that stuff back underneath me. And it's like, okay, that's a lot of work. I got to hire somebody to do that. So,
yeah, I had a problem with YouTube 2 years ago when they first came out with shorts. They said have a channel for shorts and channel for long form. And so I separated it. And then YouTube goes, oh, you can have them on the same channel. The algorithm will know. I'm like, seriously? Why didn't you think about this when you told us to move all our shorts off our main channel?
Yeah. Well, that's what they said at the beginning and it wasn't just YouTube. It was everybody who was supposedly the specialist for about YouTube were saying, do a separate channel for shorts so it doesn't make it out. No, just put it all in one place and separate it out with playlists.
Yeah. All YouTube had to do is adjust the algorithm. So if you're watching shorts, it'll just feed you shorts. If you're watching long form, it will just show you long form. What it was doing, it was going from short to long form, and that was getting people upset. But it had to tweak the algorithm like really short. I don't know. They could have made the decision quicker, but I don't live in the past. It is what it is, and we fixed it, and we just move on.
Right. All right. So with your podcast under Mr. Productivity, what do you talk about?
Productivity.
What I mean, give an example.
Well, I release 2 episodes a week. My Mondays are my video episodes. My video interview episodes. And I try to get people who are thought leaders. They could be in human resources. They could be leaders. They could be, it doesn't matter. As long as you come on and you could talk about how you are more productive. I'm not looking so much for productivity experts. I'm looking how these leadership and these thought leaders are productive in their own lives and sharing that with my audience. Thursdays, I do a solo video episode. And what I realized here is I had a lot of older episodes on YouTube that I had put as private. And what my wife does, she goes and takes those videos, she re-edits them to make sure they're not talking about a year gone by. I recorded a new outro, and then she creates that, and that comes out on Thursday, and that goes everywhere as well.
Wow. Now, so I mean, give an example of what people talk about because you say in their lives. Are we talking for personal life, business, everything?
Both. So I will ask people, some people, we talk about morning routines because I believe morning routine, how you start the day really matters. And some people are 4 a.m.ers, some are 5 a.m.ers, some are 8 a.m.ers, whatever works for you. And so we talked about that. We talked a lot about health and wellness because a lot of people don't understand healthy people are more productive people. Mm-hmm. And so I don't mean just physical health, like bulking up. I mean, your mental health as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're constantly if you're constantly surrounding yourself with negativity, it's really difficult to be productive because you have all the stress. So, I mean, obviously with over 1,300 episodes, I've repeated myself thousands of times because if you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, he talks about the same things over and over and over and over again. It's just that somebody may see one video, but they may not see the next 6 videos because we think as content creator that people are hearing all our stuff. They're really not. Like 1% of our content, our audience is actually hearing or seeing the stuff. That's why you keep repeating it.
Right. It's what you learn, and I'm keep bringing this up because this is what I brought over from radios. When you get tired of saying something, people are just starting to listen.
Yep.
And that's what people don't understand. You have to repeat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when we talk about stuff on the radio, we have to there's 4 different segments in an hour show, but you have to repeat certain things in all those different segments. So people, because they're just showing up now. Right. So it's and that's the same on social media. Only 1% of the people see what you put there because a lot of people, I already posted that. Who cares? Post it again. They don't care. If someone already saw it, was like, oh, I saw that already. I thought, but the person who didn't is not going to know. But another thing is, go ahead.
Yeah. My favorite quote is from Grant Cardone. He says, posting on social media is like kicking bricks into an ocean. So you spend all this time, I got the perfect video, the perfect post. Yeah, but 1% of the audience is going to see that. And so you think it's the greatest thing you ever created. Unfortunately, most people aren't going to see it. And so you got to take that piece of content and maybe tweak it and repost it. And that's the reality. I mean, I'm sure that's not news that people want to hear, but that's the reality.
Right. And people don't realize that only 10% of the people out there actually put stuff on social media. 90% of the people consume it.
Yep.
Yeah. And so the problem is we get our information from 10% of the population, and we don't know what 10% of that population is. So
yep.
Just remember that includes news and TV.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. It's all, as you can tell, I'm on a conservative radio show station. So
yeah, interesting. I was just on my podcast earlier today. We were talking about toxic culture in the market, in the workplace. And I was saying, my iPhone is an iPhone. It's a piece of technology. It's not Democrat, Libertarian, Republican. It's an iPhone. And I think companies make a mistake. And this is where we were talking about the hit that productivity takes, because if the leaders allow this Democrat us versus them come into the workplace, then you're not getting stuff done because everyone's, we're better than you. And you made this mistake. And I don't like this guy. And I don't like the, it affects productivity. People don't stop and think that has to do with productivity. Like, what political affiliation I have affect productivity? Well, if you're fighting at work, how productive are you being? So that's the kind of conversation I like to have on my show.
Right. And years ago, nobody talked about it. There was three things you didn't talk about: politics, religion, and child rearing. Mm-hmm. And the fourth one was how much you made. But today everybody talks, it's like these companies come up and we're going to support so-and-so. Why not you not say who you're going to support, and just whoever everybody votes the way they're going to vote and move on. When you walk into that room, vote the way you're going to vote.
Yep.
Just leave it that way and stop shoving this stuff down our throats.
When people ask me, like, who are you going to vote for in November? I'm like, none of your business. What are you, pollster? And I don't like pollsters anyways, because my vote is my vote. And if you're in my inner circle and there's like two other people, my wife and one other person in my inner circle, they know who I'm voting for. Nobody else knows who I'm voting for. I don't talk about it on social media because it's none of your business who I want to vote for. Maybe I want to write in Mickey Mouse. What's that to you? I'm an American citizen. I have a right to vote, and I will vote. But I think people get so caught up in who's vote for who and who's leading the polls. Who cares? I got a job to do. You got a job to do. I don't have time to watch all these political shows. I got things to do.
Well, unfortunately, I have the time because of what I'm on. But what I want.
Okay, you're an exception.
Well, the difference is the reason I want to know people's, like you said, why. I interview people. I want to know why they're doing what they're doing. I used to get in trouble at a table with my wife. She'd be grabbing my leg, like, stop asking that. I don't care why you voted the way you voted. I don't care what you did. I just want to understand your thought process for what you did, so I could, maybe I will change my mind. I don't know. I want to hear both sides of the argument. I don't want to just hear one side. I want to hear everything.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. When I ask people, when they come up to me and they'll say, I'm voting for so-and-so, and I'm like, why? And I love the people that go, or they'll recite talking points from that side of the aisle. I'm like, no, I want to know why you are voting. I don't care what the news outlets are saying. And most people can't give an answer. They'll just go, well, that's who I'm voting for. Okay, well, I think it would be better serve you if you knew why you're voting that way. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it would be, but people don't. And you're right about the talking points. People just pick up. This is my middle daughter is the same way. She would say certain things to me. And then when I'd ask her these questions, she'd get pissy and get upset because she can't explain anything. Well, I don't care which way you're voting, but just explain to me, just tell me why. I just want to know why you think that way. And this, because it's nice for us to have a conversation and see, because it used to be two people could, be on two different sets of the aisle and then sit down and still have a beer and dinner. Now, most of the time they can't.
I have a very smart elderly aunt. She served this country. She's like 86, and she does not like the Republican nominee. And I was having a conversation with her. I'm her nephew. We used to get along great. And then she used one of the worst talking points, and she goes, "Oh, he's just another Hitler." And when she said this, I'm like, that's just a talking point. And I know because she listens to a certain TV or watches a certain TV station. And I'm like, I just said, well, I got to go, because I didn't want to get in a fight with my aunt. And I got off the phone and told my wife, I said, she went to school. She's got a master's degree, whatever. And to just cite a talking point, without even saying, this is why I'm voting this way. She just spewed it. And listen, I believe everyone here listening to the show has got a brain, and just like Ed said, tell us why. Why are you voting that way? And if you can't come up with an answer, then you better check yourself, because there's a problem if you're just going to vote for candidate A over candidate B because you don't like candidate B. Well, what if candidate A puts us in a Great Depression? Oh, at least it wasn't candidate B. I mean, to me, that's kind of crazy logic.
Well, it's just like I look at people who are like, you know, Gumfield is, right? I'm sure you
know.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and he hated Trump, but then he interviewed him, and then he's like, oh my God, I'm wrong. And so I just, and that's what, you get to know somebody, you know, before you hate them. I mean, because how many times have you like, I don't like so-and-so, and then you actually sit down with them and talk to them, you're like, he's actually a nice guy. I guess I was wrong. You know, and that's because they heard things from somebody else about this, and what they're saying is they just don't like him. Well, you know, it used to be years ago, you go into politics, you'd be gone for 8 years, and you come back to your community and go to work. And that's how it used to be. It's not that way anymore. When it became a job to make a lot of money, that's a problem. And that's where we need to get back to that. We need to, and that's the whole thing about term limits and all. That's the political thing I said. We just need to set it up to where there's no incentive to be in the government except for public service. But if you're a bartender and you go into public service and now you're worth $20 million 4 or 6 years later, there's a problem.
Yeah. Or if they're wheeling you in on a wheelchair and an oxygen tank, I think that's a problem too.
Or if your husband just sold a whole bunch of Visa shares right before they got indicted, that's a problem.
Yeah, a little bit.
But we were not going to tell you who we're going to vote for. And again, I don't care who you vote for. That's not my job. Your job is to do what you think, but make sure you research what you're doing. And that's why I tell some other people on my radio show, because I talk about it. I go, if you're going to vote, great. But if you're not going to research the different things that they're putting out, the different bills they're putting out, if you're not going to research them and the stuff on there, then don't vote at all. Don't put a no, don't put a yes, put nothing. Because the way they set this stuff up now is if you don't vote the right way, you might want to get rid of it, but you have to vote yes to get rid of it instead of no to get rid of it. They did that to us in California with the gas tax. To repeal the gas tax, you had to say yes. And everybody's used to on any tax going no, and they understood that. And that's that whole thing about manipulating certain things and so that they can get their way. And it shouldn't be that way.
No, and believe me, there are people who've done focus groups to find out how do we word this to confuse the people so they vote the way we want them to vote. That goes on, and unfortunately, most people don't know. So what I do, like when we get close to election day, I will actually print out the sample ballots, and my wife will sit down at the table. We'll make sure we understand what is this proposition saying, because if you wait till you go in there, you're like, and of course it's like a long sentence. You're like, but if you can print out the ballots, by the way, as far as I know, any county, you print out the ballot and then you sit down when you have time and you're not rushed, and you go through it, and you can actually bring those sample ballots in the ballot with you, so you don't have to remember things. You can't use your smartphone, which is crazy, but you can bring the sample ballots. So I just encourage people, print out your ballot, study it. If you don't understand it, ask someone who maybe could help you explain it so you understand what you're voting for.
Right. Or get a person from both sides to explain why they think it should be this way and why this person think this way. And that's for like our radio show. We're going to do that. We're going to have different people come in and explain those propositions that are coming, because there's some major ones coming in California again. Sorry, my American bully just woke up and decided to open the door, which is very unusual for American bully because his head is so damn big to get it in that hole to open up that door. And he's been snoring this whole time. So, and that's what's great about these.
I thought that was you.
No, that's what's great about these
putting you sleep.
No, not at all. Appreciate you. And again, we talked about most important thing is when you're doing stuff like this, and the same with social media, everything you're doing, you need to figure out why you're doing it. And you need to do it for that one person. What I mean by that one person, your client. Who is that client you're trying to reach? Who is that one person who you're some people call them listeners, but if you're on radio, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to say you, because if you say listeners, they're looking at the person next to them and say they're talking to that person and not me. That's how that works. I got yelled at by my production guy.
Oh.
Don't say listeners.
How about y'all? Well, I'm
Why?
from Texas. Can I say
They're
y'all?
listening. Why not? And he's like, because this is what they do. They'll think you're talking to the person next to them and not them. So if you talk to them as like a you're going to get to them. I'm like, okay, perfect. I get it now. And that's the same thing with podcasting. We speak to you because you're actually doing the listening for us. And we hope that we bring you the information you want to hear. And if you're not getting the information you want to hear, you need to reach out to us and tell us, hey, we like this episode, but can you do this differently next time? Or can you do that? Get back to the host and tell them how you like it or don't like it.
You know, I invited someone to be on my show once. This is a couple years ago. And they asked the question, which I hate being asked, but how long do the episodes normally last? I said, well, 30, 60 minutes. I don't, they go as long as I want them to go, when I think I have enough value. She goes, I would never listen to a long episode. I'm like, you're going to be on the show. Why do you care? And I said, second thing is there's a pause button. How do you think I get to a 4-hour Joe Rogan podcast? I don't listen all at once. I hit the button with the 2 lines on it is pause. And so I don't aim for it. Now you're on radio, that's different, but on podcasting, I don't have a set limit. Sometimes they're 15, sometimes they're an hour and a half. It's when I think I have enough, I wrap it up. So I'm not aiming for some specific length.
Yeah. See, my goal is 30 minutes unless we're really into something and then we go longer. If it's a 10-minute podcast, we have nothing to talk about and that one's not going to production. But I haven't had many of those. I've only had one podcast I did where the guest and I argued the whole time.
Wow.
And she was a coach and she would say something and, of course it was way up here, big terminology, blah, blah. And so I would go, oh, so basically what you're saying is blah, blah, blah. That's not what I said. Yes, it was. And so I sent it to the person who was doing my editing. I'm going, I don't think this is a good podcast. She goes, oh my God, you guys argued the whole time. And I got to a point now with what you see my stuff where it hits you and tells you like if you're a week out, you're an hour out, that kind of stuff. And she had replied, oh my God, this is too much, a different one. And so I just replied back, you know what? If you have a problem with me staying in contact with you this way, I know we're not going to mesh on the podcast. So I'm just going to go ahead and cancel the podcast now. And she's like, oh my God. I was like, exactly. Thank you for proving my point. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but come on, we're here to help. We're here to understand things. We keep saying we want to know why you're doing things and how people are doing it, so we can explain that and get that to other people. And that knowledge is huge for people. And I'm still, I don't know if you are, but I'm still shocked that people listen to me. You know what I mean? I put a product out, but it's like, wow, it could be, I listened to like multiple episodes before. That was really good. I'm like, okay. All right. I'm glad people are liking it.
My favorite response, and this is not my original response. I saw this from somewhere else. Someone said to me, I listened to your show. I said, oh, you're the one. And they had this quizzical look on their face. I'm like, I was wondering who keeps listening to my show. I mean, I have more than one listener, but I'm just saying it's just funny to see people's reaction. Like, what? Really? Yeah, I have one download. It's you. Thank you.
So when I say radio, we also turn that into a podcast. So on Monday, that is in a podcast and they download that. But what I'm amazed how we have between 51 to 71,000 listeners on the radio. And so that's a lot of people in our area. And I run into them all the time where they're like, I listen to you all the time. I was sitting at an event. They're like, oh, you and your co-host now, your guys are so much better now than that other co-host you had or the one you had before that. And it's important if you have a co-host, because I used to have a co-host on my Helping the Brave podcast, which is for us veterans once we take the uniform off, multiple of them. But after a while, unless you're really into it, things are going to get in the way and you really have to be into it. And I have another guy, we do a real estate one for veterans, but he'll text me out like, oh, I can't make it on Monday to do recordings, blah, blah, blah. It's like you get to a point where if you're not going to be consistent, we shouldn't do this. And I think that's one thing that people don't get. I found you sure through Podmatch, but on there you can they tell you who to go, and you'll look at, okay, they have 10 episodes, or they haven't posted any of their episodes in the last 6 months, or 3 months, or 2 months. You don't want to go. That's what happens when I talked about the 1023. People go through this stuff, and then they just like, this is a lot of work. I don't want to keep going.
It is a lot of work because when you start your podcast, you think that I'm going to get a lot of downloads. I got 25 downloads my first podcast back in July 2017. And I'm like, okay, I downloaded it. My wife downloaded it. My cousin downloaded it. Who are these other 22 people? And I was just like, I was blown away. And then I reached the point where, man, a lot of people are not. That's weird. The lights coming through the window. I apologize for the interesting design of my shirt.
No, it's only it's only on your glasses.
Oh, okay. So I was disappointed at one point. I don't remember what point it was in my podcasting career. I was complaining to my one of my mentors, and my mentor said to me, well, how many seats are in a college classroom? I said, about 25. So if you just had 25 downloads, you're speaking to an entire room in a classroom. And when he said that, I'm like, wow, I never thought about that, because we're focusing on, I want millions of downloads. But what if you listen to 50 people have 50, you have 50 downloads, but these 50 people are like really into your thing. I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. So he helped me do this paradigm shift and focus on what's truly important. I don't focus the downloads. Matter of fact, one of the things you can get disqualified on my show, if I invite you on the show and you ask me how many downloads, you're not in the show anymore, because that tells me you're not doing it for the right reasons. I've only had, out of 1,000 guests, only 1 or 2 have asked me how many downloads, because they read it on some blog or something like that, or some coach told me that. I've had big authors and stuff like that. They never ask me downloads, because that's not why they're on the show. They're on the show to help people. So I don't care how many people have downloads on their show. And if you ask me how many downloads I have on my show, I don't tell you, because it's unimportant. Because I had a heated discussion, not on my podcast, fortunately, but someone was saying, well, why don't downloads mean anything? I said, what if I told you I had 4 downloads? And you're like, well, your podcast sucks. I said, what if I told you that was Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, and Tony Robbins? Oh, that's different. Oh, see, because we don't know exactly who is listening to our show. It's one of the things I like about podcasting. It is kind of private. Social media is not so private anymore. But I like the podcast. You don't know. I mean, you can get analytics, but you can't get really granular unless they send you an email and say, hey, I'm a 41-year-old HR director in Tulsa, Oklahoma with 2 kids, and I drive a Tesla, and I have a White House. But no one who's going to do that. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, because this show here, in the first year or so, I was in 1% of the world of downloads, right? And it was, and sorry, I don't want to get disqualified off coming on your show, but the thing, it wasn't about that. But 2 years into it, almost 2.5 years into it, we haven't talked about this because we've been talking about a little bit of other stuff, but it was Inner Edison is about your greatest competence come from your greatest defeats. And people stopped talking and wouldn't talk about their failures. And I got upset to a point where I'm like, I don't want to keep going on this if the people aren't going to talk about their failures. So I took 6 months off. Do not ever take any time off from your podcast. I don't care what people say. Like, we're taking a break for 4 months because we've been doing this, and this is our 13th episode we're going to take. People will stop listening. And I can't get, not that I'm focused on downloads, but I just know the difference. You can just see the difference because when you go on Libsyn and you upload, you can see that they tell you in your face, hey, by the way, you've only had this many uploads. And I do it differently now. And just like you, it's about quality and getting to the listener I want to get to. I don't care to get to everybody. I'm not a Joe Rogan. I'll never be a Joe Rogan, and I don't want to be a Joe Rogan. I want to be who I am, me. And if I only connect with 100 people, I'm okay with that.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Again, it's about getting that. It's about helping that one person. And if you're doing this to build your business, you just want to get to your client. So, there's people who have hardly any following on Instagram, but they're killing it on Instagram because they're only going to their client. They're posting for that one person. If you don't find out who that person is, you're not going to build your podcast. And that's what's so important about this stuff. And that's, and you don't get good at it in the first right away. It takes time to find that perfect client, who that is, who are you trying to do? And that's okay. Just keep doing it.
Oh, 100%. Like, my biggest platform is LinkedIn, and I get pitched from people who are LinkedIn experts and saying, hey, you don't get a lot of engagement on your content. I'm like, I spend most of my time in the DMs on LinkedIn. I just post once a day on LinkedIn to, for people to look at, but all my activity is happening on the DM. I said, you don't know what am I doing with DM. You have no idea how many clients I have, how much money I'm making. You have no clue. You just go and look at, you went through and made this nice graph with all this posts. And I said, I'm not even focused on the content. And they're like, in DMs. I said, yeah, that's where I'm getting my clients from, the DMs, not from my content. But you're supposed to be the expert and you haven't figured this out. So whatever, dude.
Well, it's even like if you're on Facebook and you do a live, when you look at it, you'll see like a certain number, but you won't really see the real number, right? Because people, if they don't click on the video and pull it up, they don't get counted. But there is an actual counter from people just looking at it, who look at and reading some of the words but didn't click on it. So you can't go off of what it shows on the screen, nor should you, and nor should you care. I'd be happy if they got rid of all that, just so that people would like, okay, then most people would stop posting. And it would only be people who care.
Yep. 100%.
All right. What else did I miss about you today?
Nothing I can think of. I'm just sitting here. Like I told the neighbor, hey, keep your dogs inside. I got about a 30-minute podcast episode because they got a really big dog and I don't like to interrupt other people's podcasts. So I think we covered a lot. We covered things. So I'm just saying at any minute now we could hear barking. And I can't do anything about it. It's not my dog. My dogs are in the house. But we talked about things I never talk about on the show, which is content creation, having a why and stuff like that. I usually don't talk about stuff like that. So it was refreshing. I hope that I did serve your audience today.
You did. You served them very well. They're again, it's all about getting certain information out to them. They're entrepreneurs, they're building their business. They have stuff. And, we didn't talk about failure, but the failure is doing these episodes and they don't do as well as you think they're going to do. You just have to get better at it, make mistakes and keep going. And that's okay. You're going to get to a point, because I had a friend of mine who's like, man, you're so smooth on video now because you have stuff cut up. I'm like, yeah, 10,000 hours will do that.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. And people kept asking me, why are you going live so much? You go live like 3 times a day and blah, blah. It's because in order to get good at something, you have to put the time into it, and it takes time to do it. And you really have to focus on it. And the same thing I did with radio. It wasn't I just went in, I was amazing. I was good because I spoke on the phone for years, but it's not the same. But when I started taking over other people's shows live, 3 hours and 2 hours, you got that hours in, and you're able to do stuff that you couldn't do before. Whatever makes you uncomfortable, you should be doing. Podcasts will help you get uncomfortable. So don't worry about it.
100%. Like as a guest, my job as a guest is to make sure like you don't do any editing, but some people do editing, and some hosts have to edit their podcast because, so absolutely. And I try to make my part. I can't stop them from doing that, but I've been doing, over 1,300 episodes of my own. And I've been a guest on 200-300 episodes. And so by repetition, I should get better. Although Bill Gates is 62 and he can't speak a sentence without saying, so it's like, how long you been speaking, dude? You haven't gotten proficient at speaking after all these years. So I guess some people either don't want to, or maybe they can't. I don't know, but that kind of stuff confuses me.
Or they just don't care to.
True.
He's not doing a podcast.
True.
We're doing it so that people understand they can, in less editing. And I don't care if you do ums and uhs, but a good friend of mine, Brian Galke, that we do a podcast together, we used to make fun of him on stage because he would say so many times to a point where we would make it, we'd tell him we're going to start making this into a drinking game. And finally he got to a point where he stopped doing it, because it just, on stage you'll do so and then right. And those are two things you should not be saying on stage, and people understand that. And again, it depends on where you are and what you're doing, and just get better at what you're doing. Just do it more and more and more, and do as much as you can, and you'll get really good at it.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Productivity. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me on. And can I tell the people my website?
Of course. Why wouldn't you be able to? Because you actually already did. You told me you had to spell out Mr. Productivity.
Okay. Well, maybe some people were only half paying attention in the beginning. It's just MrProductivity.com, M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. The podcast is there. My newsletter is there. The blog's there. Everything you want to know about me, MrProductivity.com.
All right. And then what I would explain for you to do next time is just put that .com right after your productivity and just slide it together a little bit there.
I'll remember that next time.
Because that's what I do to mine.
Yep, I see that.
Yeah, it just makes it easier. So when people go, what's your website? I don't know. edparcaut.com. And thank goodness there's only about 7 of us in the States. I didn't have to fight for that one.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. All right, sir. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you being on the show and giving the knowledge that you gave. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.